Welcome, folks, to the 13th of March, 2024 call for the Aries Working Group. It's hyperlogic call, and so the antitrust policy and the code of conduct are in effect. Find those links on the agenda page that is also pasted in the chat and available on the Aries Hyperledger Wiki page. So, yes, welcome all. I recognize everyone here. I'm glad you're back. Announcements, we've got IW in April. This coming up next month. We have just a little less than a month. Also, for any Caesar fans out there, we're 2 days away from the Ides of March, so watch out for that. And then, do any projects want to share release status or work updates?
I gotta say, Sam, when you said Caesar fans out there, I thought you were going to talk about the comment period for the Caesar spec on Trust Over IP.
Sorry. Does that mean we all descend on that spec and make comments on the 15th?
I'm not even sure that he's part of it, but anyway.
No, sorry. No, that was unintentionally funny.
From a Akapai perspective, continued good progress. We're at RC2, I believe, is out now, with continued evolution. I think we want to see did rotate finalized and pushed as part of RC or the final 012, and then I think we're done. And we'll move on to 1.0. So that's where we are right now. Team is also making good progress on an OnCreds RS and completing all the work for anyone to transition up to using an OnCreds RS and being able to use, ledger agnostic and OnCreds rooted anywhere. So good progress there. We did have a, I should add, we did have a request from Hedera for help. So vendors, those interested and capable of doing Akapai development work, to possibly implement a Hedera implementation. So if anyone is interested, I sent out an email, a BCC to a whole pile of people I know, vendors I knew, and am welcoming emails back. If anyone else wants to be included in that list that I send to Hedera, let me know. So just email me or hit me on Discord.
Thank you, Stephen. Any other updates from folks? We've got Keith. You've got a comment in the chat here about continuing to finish did rotate work in Akapai. Almost done there, so that's awesome.
Good.
Also, what is this vacation you speak of? I'm teasing.
Right? Who takes a vacation?
Right? How do I get in that line? No, that's awesome. Cool. Other updates before we move on to our agenda? All right. Here's what I have on the agenda for today. Welcome changes, if there's changes we ought to be making here. So a quick overview of the ecosystem page, and then we have a section of PRs for merge or close under discussion here. These were suggested by Stephen, and so that's an important discussion. And then a review of the credential protocol stuff that we have handled. This includes the almost done, the stuff that we've slated for the version we want to move to during the adoption of DIDCOM v2, and then stuff that we've placed for after DIDCOM v2 adoption, and then maybe a never section that we sorted our features into in the previous call. Are there other things that ought to be on the agenda, or any other adjustments or arrangements that we need to rearrange to be most effective today? All right. Fabric ecosystem. This was presented last time by David Boswell. This is an ecosystem page within the Hyperledger Fabric section of the wiki, where they provide an overview and a highlight and some diagrams that link to relative, repositories and other assets and resources. Here's documentation, for example, that actually applies to the project. And that was brought up and suggested to us. So I made an ecosystem page. Ours is less exciting at the moment, but it exists. And so anyone with wiki edit rights can make changes here. It is on my list, but it's going to be a minute before I get to it with other urgent spring matters happening. And so even if it's just copying and pasting content from other pages that we then need to rearrange, any help here would be appreciated. And this is just the Aries ecosystem link, and the link is in the meeting notes that we have there. And so that exists. Any questions? And again, a good example is here to be able to link to the various pieces that matter. It's also appropriate to add links to things that are Aries adjacent, meaning code that we are not directly responsible for but are used. We just indicate that, hey, here's other projects that are related. And we can link any of those resources here too. For example, like the AnonCreds RS stuff is not really directly within Aries, but it's of interest to many of us, and so that's an appropriate thing to also link from the ecosystem page, because it documents kind of how we touch and intersect with other ecosystems. Any questions on that? All right. PR review. This is there are a lot of these, and we've been backed up, and so Stephen helpfully pointed out some progress that we can make, and also work he's done to make some of this stuff happen. So appreciate his efforts here, and we'd like to move through and discuss any relevant items. Due to the number of things we need to discuss, please do speak up and interrupt if you've got something to say, or put something in chat. And that way we can move through these relatively rapidly. It's also okay to say, I'm not sure about this one yet. I'd like a little bit more time. And so if you just would like more time to review before a merge, then that's okay. Just please go ahead and raise that. We're not trying to force anything through, just trying to be efficient with our time. And so please do speak up if you, even if you just would like more time to review, even if you're not necessarily objecting. Does that work for everybody? All right. This is clarifying issue credential to remove references to payments. This was discussed last week as one of the things that we need to do. There were payment references and other things that were referenced in here that have never been used to or implemented to our knowledge, and having it in here complicates things just because of it adds sort of some documentation weight and some perceived complexity to this that isn't actually there. And so this simply removes the payment section information, and then includes a version change log that has been done. Anyone opposed to merging this PR? All right. Stephen, I don't know if you want to play Merge Master here, but that would speed us up. Thank you for doing that.
We might wind up with conflicts, so do go ahead and comments after this. We'll see how we do on the next one in particular, because it's the same, it's targeting the same
same document sections, same RFCs.
Document. Yeah.
Yes. So this was made a month ago. This was we discussed last week. This was reverting the .1 and .2 from the issue credential and present proof under the lack of implementations there. And so this was created by Stephen, and we did discuss last week. There is a note that that we have with the status note and kind of removing things there. There's an explanation down here, which is really why these things were cleaned up here, to be able to handle that and to make it work, including a link to the protocol before these items were reverted, for clarity there. So this is that information. It's pretty straightforward, in the fact that it's just removing references to things that are there. We have discussed, and this does change quite a lot. We have discussed in our roadmap the return of supplements. Right now, it's slated for the return or for the after the DIDCOM V2 conversion, because the utility that's there, but the bulk issuance is not on the list, at least as yet, for returning, just due to the complexities of how that was designed, and the difficulty in implementing. Any comments about 815 reverting .1 and .2 out of the credential protocols? All right.
You put into the comment that it was agreed to be merged. There is a conflict, so I'm not going to be able to merge it on the spot.
Okay, last call, folks. All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's a conflicting file there, so we'll have to go through and resolve these later. Let's see, back into my list. This is 814. This is updating AIP2 to clarify the commits, remove some RFCs, and retire please ACK. And so
Okay,
there's a
let me I can talk about this one just briefly. So the process that we go through in these is there is a utility in the repo that lets us see the so AIPs are set at a commit level so that there's no confusion on what they mean. So we don't let them float with master. So as main with main. So as things change in RFCs, we don't change an AIP unintentionally. From time to time, we go through and run a utility that indicates which RFCs have changed over time from the commit in the AIP, and then we can also do it includes a diff option, so we can see exactly what text changed in each of those. In this case, a number changed status. Recall that Daniel Bloom did a pass through where the status changed to adopted on a number of ones where it was, I think, previously accepted. So that's that set. A number of them had clarifications, and so that is the set there. We discussed most of these. We might want to look at 627 and 23 again, just to see, remind myself, because I've noticed I have marked discussed, as in the last time we talked about this PR, we did that. And then the last were two that have not been updated, and that's because the commits were not changed, and that's because we made substantive changes to them, and so we didn't change them. Those will be updated once once we merge that previous PR. And then finally, as discussed previously, we removed from the PR or from AIP2 encryption envelope V2 and please ACK. And as part of this PR, we're marking please ACK as retired, because we found it was overly complicated, not helpful, and not possible to implement. So there you go. That's the summary. RFC 627 was updated to retire. So it would make sense to remove it from the AIP2 list, but that has not been done. We did update the status line to reflect it had been retired. Any comments on static pure dids? I think we decide, I'm just not quite sure what to do with this. I don't know if Daniel Bloom, you have any guidance on what you think we ought to do as far relative to AIP2.
I suspect it probably just shouldn't be included at all. It has more to do with the like did peer one side of things, which we've of course since replaced with
Yeah.
did peer four and such. So I think it probably just doesn't belong in AIP2, to be honest.
Okay, I'd
It
like to do
did.
that as a thanks.
It
I'd like to do that as a follow-up PR rather than included in this one because I'd really like to get this one merged. Um,
I do agree to that. The one function it did provide is it indicated that peer did support was something that we were doing as a community as part of AIP2. And so if we have, I don't think we have a way to indicate did method support generally in the AIP, but we could
Yeah.
add that. And so we don't need to. I'm not disagreeing with removing the static peer dids RFC, but I think that having within the community for interoperability a common set of did methods that we support is important.
Okay.
So I don't know what to do there, and maybe we can address that in the subsequent update where you remove this one, is that we can add the appropriate node into the AIP.
Yeah, I will look to do that.
Cool. Okay, and this was also under discussion, you said? So six or was it 23 or was that did I misunderstand
23,
it?
the issue is the title of the RFC is 1.0 and the version does not seem to have changed, but there's a 1.1. And I know the 1.1 is actually causing grief in our world, Daniel Bloom. I'm not quite sure what to do with this one either, offhand. It's not that I couldn't look at it and probably figure it out. I just don't know what to put in at this meeting because I haven't looked at it enough. So again, I guess what we do is we defer that one to be looked at again. We don't really change anything.
So does this PR change 23 or does it leave it alone?
It points it to the latest
The newest
commit.
copy?
Yeah. And
Okay.
then we can follow up with a clarification either in AIP2 or in the did exchange one and update the commit again if we need to.
Yes, I agree with pursuing that independently.
Okay.
Okay, so there's some follow on here. Does anyone have comments about this? To be clear, we can't substantively change the AIP unless it's a clarification without bumping the version number. And so
Yeah.
what we're positing here is that these clarifications, including, for example, these are relatively uncontroversial because all it does is update the commit to reflect the status change. These include clarifications, and they're all noted here. Stephen, this is excellent work, by the way. So thank you for doing this. But it has like this is a comma correcting a typo in an example, for example, and then here is and then here's both the status change but also a clarification that did peer 2 could be used for reviews for reuse. So there's small updates here. Here's an encoding versus a string or as an integer of a number here. And so there's a very small number of clarifications here that have been made that add clarity but don't substantially change the features to be implemented. The one, of course, big difference in these ones that are not updated here, because we don't have those PRs emerged, and so we'll have to do that subsequently. So any confusion, questions, anything about this, these changes here that leave someone uncomfortable with merging? Said another way, is anyone opposed to merging this PR that updates and clarifies AIP2? Okay. There we go.
Excellent.
We now have, this is 809, clarify W3C DI attached. This is submitted by Timo back in January, and has had a number of discussions and updates based on that. And so it looks like
The
we're in a
big
good state here as of 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the big reason for holding off on that was to get feedback on the implementations that were done. Recall there's been an implementation done in Credo and one in Akapai, and I checked with the developers, and they both teams agree that they are happy with how this is written. And so we were happy before, but holding up for implementation seemed like a good idea. We have the evidence from the implementation that all is well, so I think we merge this one.
So what this does is it adds a format for credential offer for non-creds, but in the W3C format. And so it's a move.
Offer and request and issue.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to imply just the offer,
Yeah,
but the formats here are updated to so it's still a non-creds, but adapted into the W3C data model format. To represent that here, and this simply documents that. This is an additional one. It doesn't change the existing. So it's possible to support both simultaneously, or in the future, just move towards one. That's an independent discussion. And so this adds that and describes what's really happening there.
One slight clarification, Sam. This can be used for any W3C data integrity proof, not
Right.
just
Sorry. Yeah.
creds.
That's good clarification.
Yep. So essentially, as we move to full-time and on-creds in W3C format, and we support other data integrity proof, this eliminates both of the other two attachments in those scenarios.
Right. Is anyone opposed to merging this PR? All right. Hearing nothing.
Awesome.
Next up is 804 DIDCOM RPC. This one has a little bit of history in the fact that there was a bunch of feedback received in the last note that we have here back in January that was the implementations were underway. Was the last, and then we've merged in, and then you add a problem report to the protocol.
Okay, so this is a similar thing to the VCDI one in that we were relatively happy with it, but we knew we had implementations on the way. There's now an implementation in Akapai. There's an implementation in, or as an Akapai plugin, I should say, and there's one in Credo as well. So with that, we did add the possibility of a problem report. That was an interesting one, so I would like to highlight it because it's a lesson learned from both Please Act and this PR. So the problem came about was the one in one of the implementations or tests or something, a request message came across. So this is a back and forth request response protocol. In the request message, the JSON RPC code was mangled, or the request was mangled, so that even though it was a valid message, it wasn't valid JSON RPC or something like that. So the JSON RPC couldn't be processed to get a response at all. It was a problem at the DIDCOM level in communicating the message, not in the processing of the JSON RPC requests. So if it had been at the JSON RPC request level, you just send an error back using the normal protocol. But since it was an error at the DIDCOM messaging level, a problem report was appropriate. And so that is what we added, is that you can send a problem report back. At the same time, it was suggested that a problem report could also be sent back the other way when you send the response and the client receives it. If the response is mangled at the DIDCOM level, should you send a problem report back to say, hey, what the hell are you sending back? This is a mess. And the argument is no, you should not, because from the point of view of the sender of the response message, the protocol is finished. There is no protocol executing. It's no longer in flight. And so if you send a problem report back after, on receipt of the response, it's just going into the ether, and the receiver of that's going to go, I don't know what protocol this is about, so I'm going to send back a problem report saying, I don't know what you're talking about. At which case the other side will send a problem report back saying, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, and you get a mess. So the message there is, when you want to send problem reports and other related messages, you cannot change the protocol state machine. And so sending a message after the other side thinks the protocol has completed messes up the protocol state. In order to handle that message, they would have to keep the protocol around, keep it alive for some unknown period, just in case a problem report comes back, and that's bad. This is exactly what happened with the JSON or the please ACK. Sending an ACK back after the thing was completed messes up the protocol state machine. And so, and anytime you change the protocol state machine, it's protocol specific. And so it shouldn't be done as a arbitrary thing, but as a specific change to it. So that long explanation was just to say, we need to think about these things as they happen to, or as we propose changes, to make sure we don't do stuff like that. Like a protocol, once it's finished on one side, should be assumed to be thrown away and can't be touched afterwards by the other side. Hope that was reasonably clear.
Keep your hands up.
Could we look at the possibility of reverting the completed state back as opposed to waiting?
No.
Okay.
Because
Clear enough.
what you want is to, the general assumption should be that the other side literally deletes the protocol. It doesn't save the in-flight protocol.
That's
So
right, yeah.
your mental model should be, when a protocol completes, it's eliminated, and it's up to the controller to keep whatever state around is needed, not up to Akapai or the framework. And that's why there's no knowledge of what, what protocol was running or anything like that. The right solution is if it screws up, you send back another, you run another instance of the protocol, hopefully with cleanup.
So I will not contest this change, but I think we've made a mistake that it's not a recent one, in how we've considered the mental model of messages actually passing back and forth and how they ought to be implemented. So I think that we need further discussion just generally about how DIDCOM works and in fundamental assumptions that exist. But I'm not going to contest it here. This is not the right place to litigate that particular problem. And so I will not at all contest this particular protocol. And I think it's okay for protocols like this to have a very opinionated feeling about how problem reports actually ought to be sent. The problem I have is way more general than that, and how we actually process and manage protocol state between implementations.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is that I've heard from implementations, and why I push this is there's this desire not to have things hang around forever. And by leaving optional things at the end of a protocol results in having to keep things around essentially forever, just in case somebody comes back with another response. So that's where that comes from. I think that's, I don't know if that's where
I
you're
don't
going, but
I
happy
don't
to
just
have it.
it is, but that's not what I was really talking about. I definitely think that helping things be resolved cleanly under normal cases is good. I think that we need to reevaluate the way we think about problem reports and perhaps change the way that we use them so that you can identify something that you've already thrown away and then just ignore it as opposed to responding back and saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. The inability to send a problem report back and put and apply error back pressure, I think, is a design flaw. And so we need to figure out what is necessary to allow that to happen, but without placing a large burden on implementers who just have already finished the thing and want it to go away. Um,
Yeah.
but that way, for example, an error would in fact show up in the logs, so that if they're trying to figure out why something happened and they're like, oh, it turns out we're returning a malformed response, and they complained about it, would actually show up in logs at some point. And but we can adjust the expectations and the logic so that you don't end up with a circular I have no idea what you're talking about conversation.
Yeah.
But that's not an issue about protocol design, which and leaving that in a final state is good. It's really an issue about error reporting and expectations there.
Yes. Yep.
But I have no contest with the way that this is written. I think that this is sufficient for the protocol, and that's a totally separate discussion to have.
Sounds good.
Thank you for that background, Stephen. I will only call out there is a little bit of history here in the fact that this was originally proposed differently and it was not JSON RPC based and was focused a little bit more on app attestation. It's now listed as an example, and I'm trying to find there you go. So this is listed as a motivation that could happen, but this is not a definition that actually is contained inside the protocol. Just an example of why this is useful, and that's why it's in the motivation section. This is a generic just RPC or JSON RPC wrapper for that. Just there's no correction there. That's just a clarification. Any comments?
I mean, one thing we could do is change the title. Well, no, that's ugly. Naming isn't naming a pain.
Yes.
DRPC is used for DIDCOM RPC, but we're really just, as you said, wrapping JSON RPC. That turned out to be whoever suggested that came up when we first proposed this was brilliant, because it's exactly what we needed, just the right weight. So we could rename it JSON RPC, but I think we just go ahead now that we've got two implementations. It is a plugin in Akapai, but it is implemented in Credo, I believe. So let's just leave it as is.
Yes, I think that just needs to be clarified, and it is here in the very first line that this is a JSON RPC tunnel.
Yeah.
So Keith, I think that were you looking for an explanation here about not sending the error report in that particular case?
I wonder if that would be too implementation specific, because I guess it depends on how internal records are being handled in each framework. Like in Akapai, I believe we delete the internal state records once the transaction is complete or the interaction is completed. And I don't know if that's the same for Credo, so maybe I think it's fine as is.
It's important that the protocol itself not care about implementation details. The designers can care, but the protocol itself does not dictate internal implementation details.
Yeah.
Just
And I think
at the level of expectations.
Yeah, and I think it's just to keep things simple enough. It's send a problem report for the request, but we don't require it for the response. And I think this is sufficient enough.
Right. Okay. Okay, so is anyone opposed to merging this PR? All right. That is done. We have 729 goal code for connectionless present. So Stephen, we have so we're at 19 minutes left. And I
Yeah.
didn't include all the ones that you had originally suggested just for time, and you
Yeah, I
had
know.
mentioned that some discussion of the credential protocols would be useful. So I'm trying to like balance the progress that we're making here on the PRs with the needed discussion in
Yeah,
other areas.
so all good. I can close 801 and 790 because they are now overcome by the merges done here. So I'm happy to do those. The goal codes for connectionless present. I mean, it's so minor. Why don't you take a quick peek at it? And it's just
Okay,
a trivial change. It
so this
just
is
adds,
the addition of a officially documented goal code for verifier once.
yes.
It indicates that you're creating a DIDCOM connection for the sole purpose of doing a one-time execution of the present proof protocol. Once it's done, both sides should delete the connection, as it will not be used again. And so this is highlighting a specific goal code that can be used for a single purpose present. In this particular case, this could be useful, for example, for presenting a movie ticket at a movie theater, in the sense that you don't expect to go to, and you can just reestablish another one later on,
Yep.
and not really have it hanging around for other reasons. Is anyone opposed to merging this, the addition of the Aries VC verifier once goal code? Okay, that is good. Okay, and these and Stephen mentioned we can close these because they're clarified, or the purposes of these were encapsulated in newer PRs that we've already approved for merging. So those will just be closed just because of the fact that they're old and don't apply anymore. Their goals have been accomplished other places.
Yep.
Okay, any final
Thanks.
comments about PRs before we move on to the next topic? Awesome. Wanted to give everyone a chance to revisit the credential protocols. I should go into edit mode here so I can take notes. To revisit the protocol discussions that we had this last time about um, how we classify different elements of where we were working on and what we were doing there, and to help inform that discussion. We had a great conversation the last two meetings actually that resulted in the list that we have here. The creation of and then the classification of that was really useful. So any comments or feedback that everyone has on our discussions for the credential protocol changes? So hearing no objections, any or anything specifically, should we rearrange and put some of these items either before the conversion did come v2 or after the conversion, or maybe things that we should not do? Do we want to reclassify any of these after our conversation last week? Stephen, did you have some comments or?
Um, I mean, they're done, almost done. We got those done today. Although Patrick's note is not mentioned.
Well, we did revert 1 and 2, which is real
Yeah.
similar, I think, to what kind of Patrick was mentioning. I don't think Patrick's here to defend himself, but I think we
Yeah.
encompassed what he was mentioning in that discussion 2 weeks ago with the removal of, or the reversion of 1 and 2, and payments as well. So I think it's in the spirit of that.
But as far as ordering and that, I'm not sure.
Any other thoughts or changes that folks want to make to this? Um, One of the interesting bits of discussion here is that we have the 1 dot releases of these protocols, or the 2 dot release of these protocols, and there was created at one point a 3 dot release of these protocols as part of the wacky PEX effort, which became the wacky DIDCOM effort. And so one of the open questions there is, do we start from version 2 or do we start from version 3 to see where we landed? And it may be a little bit moot. The version 3 was created only with the minimal number of adjustments required to how attachments were handled, since that was the actual necessary change between DIDCOM v1 and DIDCOM v2. And so even if we started on the other protocol and made those same minimum adjustments, then we'd, I think, end up where we are. More interesting is the version that we should go to afterwards, and we might want to end up at version 4 of these protocols to remove any confusion about these additional things that we are adding or clarifying as part of that process. Specifically, we talked about negotiation pulling out into a separate sibling protocol, so that it can still be used, but support for it can be independently signaled through Discover features, and the overall protocol itself becomes simpler as part of that. We also need to document the short circuit of the protocol, which isn't really a change, but clarify that that's an acceptable use of the protocol itself to make that happen. And these other ones are more clarifications, except for the change to use explicit no messages instead of problem reports, when it's an explicit no instead of an error. And so there will be adjustments to the protocols themselves there. And so we will definitely need some adjustment in the language there. And what we probably ought to end up with is a HackMD draft that we can use to tune the language here, so that we can get these items cleaned up and clarified, since these would be new protocols, including the addition of a negotiation protocol, sibling protocol that can be used alongside these in the documentation there. Any thoughts, comments, questions about the credential protocol discussions that we've had, or future work going forward? So if we're settled then on the direction that we ought to go, the open question remains about who actually does the writing of these, or the clarification of these. Mostly it's not brand new writing, because we're starting from where we are and adapting, including with a negotiation protocol there. And so it's really some work sort of starting from a starting place, and then moving through the necessary changes to make that happen. Are there any volunteers that would like to sort of earmark one piece of this process, for their own effort, and then the rest of us, of course, could review and assist? This is something that I can do, but there will be a little bit of a delay, as I will be out the second half of next week. I think immediately following this call next week, I've got some. It's vacation, but for a purpose, so I'll be quite busy. But I'll be out, and so I won't be, because of the effects of that. I won't be able to get to this probably for at least a week or two moving forward. And so if someone does have some cycles that they can spend on this, then that would be beneficial. Okay, please reach out, channels or otherwise, in Discord to talk about that, and then we can move forward and make some progress there. That was a shorter discussion than I had planned on, which leaves us with some time for open discussion or other suggestions or anything related to our previous meeting topics. Does anyone have anything that they want to bring up, including suggestions for a future conversation or things that they love to work out or discuss?
So we're actually going to finish early on a Aries working group call.
When was the last time that happened? Besides like holiday adjacent meetings, which sometimes are just everyone's on vacation anyway.
I could raise a quick question on Hyperledger mentorships. Just it's a related one, although not specific to Aries. It's more related to Indy, but we put in a mentorship proposal for doing a Indy read replicas. We're looking for a and so that's a, you know, allowing an enterprise to run a local cache essentially of Indy of an Indy set an Indy network, the transactions of an Indy network, and so that they can be served locally to clients that trust the cache. If anyone wants to help out on that mentorship by being a mentor on that one, we're still looking around for somebody to help with that. And so if you have somebody at your company that would be a good mentor or want to be a mentor yourself, again, connect with me on Discord or however you want.
Those
That one,
mentorships.
go ahead.
I was just gonna clarify. Those mentorships are actually paid by Hyperledger, so this is a paid mentorship for folks that want to join, and with encouraging folks to get involved in open source. So there's a stipend that is associated with that, and they receive part of it at the beginning, part of it at the end, and then work with community members and open source communities inside of Hyperledger to understand the project and to receive review of it when they've done the work. So this is great because we apply for this, and if the project is selected, then Hyperledger funds actually pay for that development to happen, and then we're able to find someone. Often it's a student or someone that is looking for summer work to make that happen. And so it's a really cool program that Hyperledger runs that is part of it. Sorry, Stephen, was there something else in addition to that, or?
No, perfect. Just to be
Cool.
clear, the mentee gets the stipend, not the mentor.
Yes. We just donate our time as community members to guide the mentee, the person who applies to do the work. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. So please reach out to Stephen if you're interested in doing so. Any final comments before we end slightly early today?
Well, we could answer Patrick's question on an issue that he raised. Why not? Let's go for it. In the protocols, we talk about how in the threading, we talk about how it's an issue in Aries RFCs. In threading, we talk about when a protocol comes from another or is initiated as a result of another protocol. The the first protocol that was running is the parent thread in the second protocol. So when you start an out of band, that has a thread ID. When the invitation transitions into a DIT exchange, the parent thread of the DIT exchange is the thread of the out of band. So that's understood. And Ariel and I talked about why that was done in DIT exchange and so on. And Patrick says, yeah, I know all that. What I'm wondering about is in DIT exchange, not only do you put the parent thread ID on the request message, I want to request a connection with you, but it specifically says that the parent thread ID should also be in the complete message that comes back. And his question is, why in did exchange should we call out that the parent thread needs to be in the complete message versus, it's optional, and as long as it was in the first message, both sides know that was the parent. So why does it have to be in the complete message as well? And I didn't remember any reason why we said, oh, it must be. See that line right there. The P thread ID is required in this message and must be identical to the pre thread used in the request message. Why is that line in there? I don't know.
So
I
this is
guess we could
digging
look
into
at blame and
history.
then,
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
it's
I
probably
didn't really
me.
have an answer.
Can you get blame in the browser now? Didn't they add that?
Did
It's
they?
prob. Let's
Yeah,
see.
blame. There you go.
Left-hand side.
But I can't think of any rationale of why it would be needed.
So I think it was intended to be a convenience because that's the correlating value that
Yeah,
goes
yeah.
that travels back in order to just clean that up. In theory, you shouldn't need it, but I think at the time our intention was that could just be that
Yeah,
could be
because it ties to the connection whatever for the invitation that was used to create it.
yes. So that's in the request still. This will be fun. Let's blame somebody.
Yeah, Telegram Sam.
I told you it was probably my fault.
Yes.
And
Update
so,
given feedback though. Oh, look at that. You did it because there was feedback.
well, it's one of the updates I made giving feedback. So yeah, this is like 4 years ago, a little less than 4 years ago. But I think that was intended to just be a convenience correlating identifier to have happen. I think
Yeah.
that's the only reason.
And now Patrick's doing a new implementation and by default he doesn't include it, and then he gets yelled at because he didn't include it. Because his implementation doesn't require, yeah, that's my guess, but I didn't really have much better an answer than that.
I think that's the
And then
only answer we really have.
we used up the final 4 minutes. If you want to put a comment on that issue, that'd be nice, but I don't know what else. I put a comment this morning.
It's a little bit of a weak sauce comment.
Yeah, exactly.
Seemed
I don't
like a
know.
good idea at the time. So, yeah. So, yeah, I'll add a quick comment there. Cool.
All right.
All right, folks. Thanks for coming today. We made great progress. Steven saved us from having to end early. Oh, the horror. And we will see you all next week. I hope everyone's week is a great one.